Well, there you go. So on to Josh.
Me.
Joshua, you are
I'm
up
still
next.
here.
Yeah, you are.
So we're going to
Alive
talk
and
about
well.
Metallica's.
Still stand.
Talking about Metallica's Master of Puppets, the first full bio for them. And in the opening montage, you heard Leper Messiah, and now you're going to hear Welcome Home Sanitarium.
My friend, and you will see the dream is my reality. They keep me locked up in this cage. Can't they see it's why my brain says rage? Sanitarium, leave me be. Sanitarium, just leave me alone.
All right, Matt, what are the stats on this one?
So Master of Puppets by Metallica comes in at number 13 in the 1980s. Big jump from BDP. Number 2 in 1986. Number 108 of all time. It's Metallica's highest ranked album on Best Ever Albums. It's also on Rolling Stone's list, coming in at number 97, so it's cracking the top 100 there. And Metallica is ranked as the number 41 highest overall artist on Best Ever Albums.
Okay, so Metallica, they formed in 1981 in LA when Danish drummer Lars Ulrich, who was 18 at the time, placed an ad in the newspaper, The Recycler, which said, quote, "Drummer looking for other metal musicians to jam with Tigers of Pantang, Diamond Head, and Iron Maiden," unquote. Guitarist James Hetfield, also 18 at the time, and Hugh Tanner answered the ad. And the band was officially formed on October 28th, 1981. I take that to mean that Hugh Tanner just happened to answer the ad as one of the people, but he wasn't in the original iteration.
He wasn't in any iteration?
Yeah, he was just a guy.
Was he like Hetfield's buddy or something, or was he just like a random dude that just maybe they answered and didn't put in?
Exactly. I think he just showed up. The name Metallica came from Lars's friend Ron Quintana when he was brainstorming ideas for a metal fanzine that he was making. He considered the name Metallica or Metal Mania, and Lars said, "I'm going to take Metallica as a name for my band, so don't use it for the magazine." Dave Mustaine then joined the band soon after responding to another ad looking for a lead guitarist. So following a long line of bands that placed ads in papers and then people answering, which doesn't happen anymore. They recorded their first original song, Hit the Lights, in early of 1982 for a compilation album called Metal Massacre 1 from the Metal Blade Records label that they knew. The band played its first live performance March 14th, 1982 at Radio City in Anaheim with a new bassist, Ron McGovney, and then their second gig actually came opening for the band Saxon at one stop on their 1982 US tour. Saxon was a British band, metal band. The term thrash metal was not around yet. It was not coined until February 1984 by Kerrang journalist Malcolm Dome. And before that, Hetfield
I wonder if it came off the dome.
Yeah, exactly. Before that, James Hetfield had called Metallica power metal, so he was using that at the time. In late 1982, Ulrich and Hetfield saw a show at the Whiskey A Go-Go where bassist Cliff Burton was performing, and they were, quote, blown away by him and his playing, and they recruited him to join Metallica. But he initially declined, but then agreed to join the band on the condition that they moved to El Cerrito, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. And that's kind of where they've stayed ever since. Metallica's based out of San Francisco.
I believe that's pronounced El Cerrito, right? So, yeah.
They kicked out Ron McGovney, citing that he, quote, didn't contribute anything. He just followed. So they, in Cliff Burton out, Ron McGovney, short-lived. Metallica wanted to record their debut album with the aforementioned Metal Blade Records, from that compilation that they were a part of, but they could not cover the cost of the recording, the record label. So concert promoter Johnny Z Zazula signed them to his Megaforce record label after they shopped around to labels in New York City, but none of them showed interest, so he stepped in and signed them to his label. In May of 1983, Metallica traveled to Rochester, New York to record their debut album, Metal Up Your Ass, later changed to Kill 'Em All, and I'll tell you about that in a bit. This is the...
Oh, they should have kept it the first one.
Yeah. This is the... At this time, members of the band decided to kick Dave Mustaine out of the band, citing drug and alcohol abuse and violent behavior just before they recorded the album on April 11, 1983. And then Exodus guitarist Kirk Hammett then joined the band and replaced Mustaine the same afternoon. So I guess he was in Rochester somewhere or in New York.
Think about how they kicked him out for drugs or being difficult.
Both. I think.
Think about how many drugs you had to do, because weren't they called Alcoholica? Wasn't that Metallica's like nickname?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The media nicknamed them that due to their drinking. So yeah, it must have been really bad if he was doing that.
Or he had to be like a super dick because like they just used this excuse. Yeah.
Metallica's first live performance with Hammett was on April 16th, 1983, so shortly after he joined, at a nightclub in Dover, New Jersey called The Showplace with Anthrax as the opening band. Mustaine went on to form Megadeth, as you guys know, and there was bad blood between him and the band for quite a long time afterwards, I would say, or a grudge, I should say. Kill 'Em All was released on July 25th, 1983. It was renamed to that after the record label and distributors thought it wouldn't sell well under the other name. Probably rightfully so, but who knows. The album did not sell well, relatively speaking, but grew their fan base in the underground metal scene that was around at the time, and it's considered the first thrash metal album released in the US. Interesting. It's always funny to think of metal as being like an underground scene because it's so kind of well known and prominent nowadays. But their second album, which we've also talked about, Ride the Lightning, was recorded in Copenhagen, Denmark, and released August 1984. It reached number 100 on the Billboard 200 with virtually no airplay and received positive response from the critics as well. They were signed to Elektra Records in late 84 after the A&R director Michael Alago and Cliff Bernstein of Q Prime Management saw one of their concerts. They then went on their first European tour, and Metallica played its largest show up to that point at the Monsters of Rock Festival in Donington Park, England on August 17, 1985, with Bon Jovi and Rat playing to 70,000 people. So quite a step up. Which brings us to their third album, this album, Master of Puppets. It is recorded between September and December of 1985 at Sweet Silence Studios in Denmark, and the album was released on March 3rd, 1986. Metallica was motivated to make an album that would impress critics and fans alike. Hetfield and Ulrich were the main songwriters on this album. They described the songwriting process as starting with, quote, guitar riffs, assembled and reassembled until they started to sound like a song, quote, unquote, and then they would think of a song title and would write the lyrics afterwards. They decided to record in Denmark after not being satisfied with the acoustics of the American studios that they were considering at the time. Ulrich was actually in talks with Geddy Lee of Rush to produce the album, but the collaboration never materialized due to scheduling. And the album was produced by Flemming Rasmussen, an all-time producer name if I've ever heard one. All of the songs except two of them were already completed before they arrived in Denmark to record, but recording took longer because they had developed a sense of perfectionism and had high ambitions for this album. The cover was designed by Metallica and Peter Mensch and painted by Don Brodingham. It depicts a cemetery field of white crosses tethered to strings, manipulated by a pair of hands in a blood-red sky. Ulrich says it summarizes the content and themes of the album, as I'm sure you've picked up on, hopefully. The album was critically acclaimed on release and had a 72-week run on the Billboard 200, debuting at 128 and peaking at 29, and earned the band its first gold record. More than 500,000 copies were sold in its first year, even with virtually no radio airplay and no music videos. So word of mouth definitely spread that song. The Damage Inc. tour began in March of 1986 after the release of the album, and they spent March to August touring as the opening act for Ozzy Osbourne in the US. And this was their first tour to play large arenas. Metallica was noted by the media for their excessive drinking, and they were nicknamed Alcoholica. And the European leg of the tour began in September of 86 with Anthrax as their supporting band. And unfortunately, the morning after their performance on September 26th in Stockholm, the band's bus rolled off the road, and bassist Cliff Burton was pinned under the bus and died. Or I also saw reports of him being ejected from the bus when it rolled over. I don't know which one's true. The driver claimed he hit a patch of black ice, but others believed he was either drunk or fell asleep at the wheel. The driver was charged with manslaughter but never convicted. And the band returned to San Francisco after that and hired bassist Jason Newsted after more than 40 people auditioned, and they ended up finishing that tour in February of 1987. Now, we will cover Metallica later in the 90s, and we will be talking about another one of their albums coming up here as well, And Justice for All from 88. So I'm not doing any more bio. I will finish up the bio when we get to the 90s. But Master of Puppets, and Matt, I think you go first. And what did you think of this album?
Yeah, I didn't. That's another one. My early Metallica knowledge is not very extensive. I knew Master of Puppets, and that's probably the only recognizable song on here. God, they play fast. It's unbelievable, and I know that hasn't changed really since their first couple albums, but I'm just amazed at the speed in which they are able to play. And I've seen them live before, and it's like when you see somebody play like this, it's not like they're just doing it for like 1 3-4 minute long song, like to do it for an extended concert. And a lot of these songs are long, right? And I know they have a little bit of a proggy nature to them, which I definitely like. I like kind of like the different movements that you have. I like how they bring it up and down. But man, when they're playing fast, it's just like I don't know how they're able to do it, and to do it and to stay so tight as a band is just a remarkable talent that these guys were able to do. So I mean, that's easily the thing that sticks out the most, is just how fast and how tight this really is. There's great riffs all over the place here. I think my favorite song on here might be the instrumental. That song is awesome. That Orion, it's the riffs that they have on there. It's really melodic. The guitar it's like the notes that Kirk Hammett is playing over the riff. It's so melodic. It's so cool. They have really great guitar tones that are happening there. This like on a higher pitch kind of, they do a little bit of an echoey effect that's happening. It's a really crisp, clear production sound. Very, very, kind of pleasing to hear. I like how they opened up Battery with like the Spanish guitar. Actually, when I was playing this earlier tonight, I didn't play this album a whole lot, like in my just out loud in my kitchen living room, as I do sometimes with other albums. When I was playing this here tonight, and well, Sherry's okay with this. It's a bit much. I think just like maybe one song is okay, and then mix it up with other stuff. Like an entire album, I think was hard. But when I started playing this, she didn't know what it was, and when she lit up because the Spanish guitar, because she loves the Spanish guitar. She's like, "Who is this?" And I'm like, "Julio Iglesias." And she's like, "Oh, really? The Feliz Navidad guy?" I was like, "Yeah." And I just like let it, and then all of a sudden it comes in, and she's like, "Oh, it's Metallica." So I just love how they kind of do the intro they kind of take you a little bit of a calming feel, and then the real stuff comes, So it's crazy. Hetfield's voice is great. It's like, I don't know. That's another thing. I don't know how guys can sing like this raspy, he's not screaming, but the singing style is it's got to do so much damage. The training and the preparation that he has to do for his vocals to be able to sound like this and to keep going for hours on end at a concert or for a recording is also super impressive as well. So, it does kind of blend together in certain parts for me. Like at times I was like having a difficult time differentiating one kind of thing from the next. And I'm also kind of not sure, do I like this better than Ride the Lightning? I don't know. I can't say that I do. I think I probably like both of them better than Kill 'Em All, but it's not like, to me, and maybe other Metallica fans and people that are much more into this genre can decidedly say, oh, this is much better than Kill 'Em All. I definitely think these are more mature albums, like that. There's more the progressive nature of it, the way that they kind of flow, different movements and things like that. They're expanding their sound in some ways, but it's also it's very much rooted in that thrash metal kind of thing. That's the main, 85 to 90% of what you're hearing is kind of in that lane. And to me, who doesn't have as refined a palette of this, it does kind of blend together. It's all still good, but it's an experience to listen to from front to back. It's you don't just put this on any time, or if you do, you're not gonna. There's times where you're gonna feel this more than others, I think, and that's a good thing when you want to feel this way. It's not such a good thing if you kind of want to. If you want a little bit of a different thing. But having said that, there are times where they do bring it down and they do kind of do different things, which is nice. It's just the majority of this is that thrash metal, the speed, which is, like I said, really impressive. So, this is badass, bottom line, and definitely thumbs up for me. So, yep.
Yeah, if you ask me to rank the three we've done so far, I think I'd put Ride the Lightning ahead of Master of Puppets a little bit in terms of my personal pecking order, with Kill 'Em All being third. But that's not to say, though, that there's not lots of good on this. And, I mean, obviously the self-titled is one of the inner circle Metallica songs, Master of Puppets. It's an 8-minute plus epic. I love it, but I think the song that I always come to on this, I'm glad you mentioned Orion, Matt, because I actually really have always loved Orion as well as a song, as an instrumental, and I like when Metallica throws in an instrumental, but Welcome Home Sanitarium is like a classic Metallica, and that it's got a little bit of ballad qualities at some points, but not a lot, so it's veering all over. Battery is, as you mentioned, is just fast. It's a fast, heavy song.
It's a great opener. It's a really good, the way they introduce it's a great opening track.
And Damage Inc. is also on the way out. It basically shoves you out the door. Yeah.
The album seems to pick up speed as it goes on.
It's like it thrusts you into the house at the beginning, right, with Battery, and then eventually when it's done, it kicks you out the back door with Damage Inc., I feel, is like how this album goes. And in between, there's a lot of different stuff.
I think Disposable Heroes is really fast, too.
Yeah, it's right in the middle. So it's, I mean, at this point, Metallica's playing just about everything fast, which is why their ballads, when they're doing them here, or things that are resembling ballads or slower parts, stand out. And I think that's what kind of goes in. And they'll give you interludes where you're like, ooh, wow, like you said, it's, the Spanish guitar, or they slow it down and play this very pretty melodic thing. But you just know at this stage of Metallica's career, you're just waiting for the hammer to drop again. Yeah. That's why they were so fascinating to listen to when they did the S&M concert, right, with the orchestra.
Oh, yeah.
Because they actually worked remarkably well with the format of an orchestra with like a furious conductor, like Metallica it was genius for whoever put two and two together, right? That they were such a good mix, because
I think they've done that a few times too.
They've done it on multiple occasions, but I just always thought it was kind of a genius thing, because they do sort of have these codas and rises and falls and crashes right along the way, and bilges. So I love that. I've mentioned it before, and I'm going to mention it again. Like, I feel like James Hetfield was walking an entire generation of males through attempting to like understand things like depression and grief and stuff like that. Like, I'm always amazed when we do the multiple listens of the Metallica albums, right? Because Metallica for years was to me about, the energy, right? But now as I explore, and I was aware of songs like Fade to Black and One and stuff that were pretty profound lyrically. But I think more and more I realized just how much, like, he really was, I don't think he set out to do it, but the lyrics are just very personal and very relatable, I think, especially for like men who it just doesn't come easy to, right? And like, I can't stress enough how much I feel that like that is such an unusual lane to be in, right? Like, speaker of emotions for those that don't do emotions easy, right? And like, that's kind of, I think, why there's so many stories of vets, for example, talking about they'd play Metallica when they were overseas and lonely or lost hope and stuff, or people, when life threw them curveballs, or fighting through their own depression and stuff. That I think for some people, the idea of you're going to feel better when you play Metallica is a foreign concept to them, but for those that it does, it's the opposite, right? It like makes total sense. And I do think that might be a line of demarcation to metal in general, that someone who may not be amenable to it might hear this and say, oh, that sounds harsh or uninviting. But like, especially when you hear this type of metal, it really can set you free in some ways, and be uplifting, even if it's dark at the same time. And I think that's really the virtuoso-ness of Metallica is really understated, and their place as like one of the most important American bands, I think, is also wildly underrated in terms of where they stand on that. I will go to my dying day and say there is no logical argument that can be made that Metallica is not one of the 5 most important American bands of all time. It's just, there isn't. Like, there's no argument, in my opinion. I'd love to hear somebody say it, but the argument would start with, I don't like metal, right? But like on every other element, right? Like influence, sales, moving American music a certain way in genre, like the ability to have multiple careers, right? And reinvention, length of career, like everything is checked by Metallica. And I don't think anybody ever talks about them as a top 5 band, and like there's a whole generation of music fans that I think the idea behind that would give them like indigestion, but like it just cracks me up because it's like, it's, once you get past personal taste, it's like undeniably a no-brainer. It's like it's without a doubt, and I don't think unless you think about that for a while, you default there, right? Because you think, oh, there's people that love Metallica, right? And then there's people that don't connect with them. But it's then you start to realize, like, I think of like my mom can listen to Metallica, right? Like maybe not all Metallica, but enough that my mom will say, oh, I enjoy Metallica, right? And my mom is in her late 60s, right? And certainly not there. But it's funny because until, maybe the mid 90s when there's all the discussion about where Metallica's at, maybe Black Album, depending on it, but like they're still making songs that can cross over even at this stage when they are definitively in this space. And that's a gift, and like it's not easy to transcend a niche genre and suddenly make it not niche anymore. And probably no one has had more influence on metal becoming palatable for a mainstream audience than Metallica, right? I mean, who?
Oh, definitely.
I mean, they're it.
They basically brought it to the masses, I would say.
So this is another in a series of 80s Metallica albums that are going to be easy thumbs up for me. Like I said, I might like Ride the Lightning a little bit more. We're going to do, Injustice for All coming up and some other stuff along the way. So we'll be able to, probably all of us will have our definitive ranking of 80s Metallica. But yeah, I mean, this is a clear thumbs up.
And they also, I would say, like they benefited too from, they got more airplay, with MTV in particular. I don't remember seeing a ton of Judas Priest videos on it, or Iron Maiden. You know, I never knew what Iron Maiden looked like until like 15 years ago. You know what I mean? So like Metallica was also like they were more marketable, I think, than some.
But I don't know if
metal bands
anybody
too.
could have been Metallica. Like if you gave them Metallica's variables, I don't. As much as I love Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath, like I don't think anybody could be Metallica except for Metallica. I don't think you can cast that role, and they were like uniquely like circumstance, right? I think like Metallica's always going to be Metallica, and I don't think you can say, oh, if you put insert band A in Metallica's trajectory that anyone becomes.
No, I'm just saying they were able to cross that boundary. They were able to kind of were able to take something that was very niche and make its way into the mainstream. Maybe not like overwhelmingly so, but definitely enough to like bring it to like some young dumb kid that from upstate New York like me who wouldn't have been able exposed to them before, because I took a lot of my takes from MTV. So
well, and they're really not having videos at this point. The first
not at
Metallica
this
video
point,
I can
no.
remember is one, and that's later.
One. Yeah,
and they're not getting played on the radio. So I mean, they're selling 2 million albums, largely on word of mouth. At this point, which is kind of remarkable when you think about that.
No internet,
Yep.
no way to. They just had to play shows and do like legit word of mouth.
No radio, no MTV, no internet, they're just it's like somebody's brother. It's like what I always tell my story, right? Like somebody's brother had them and said this band kicks ass, and somebody listened to goes this band kicks ass, and then it just keeps like sells,
well, not just their sound, but when you have like the majority of your songs are over 6 minutes long, that when you got to have 3.5 at most for a lot of singles.
No, but the table had been set for that because there'd been a lot of metal acts that went long, whether it be Sabbath or Led Zeppelin or Iron Maiden, right? So like there were some folks that set the table for that, but like you said,
but the 8-minute songs weren't making their way out. They weren't playing. Well, maybe Stairway might have broken that. That might have been a little different. But most radios are not, or they're trimming it down. They're cutting back like a couple minutes on stuff too. So
I think that kind of gets to the prog nature of their album and their structure is like you said, Matt, and they kind of each have their own little like crests and troughs and kind of journey within each song, and they go really hard, but then they like give you a chance to catch your breath, and then they like go right back into it and after a little like interlude or something. And I think that makes the songs kind of easier to comprehend and kind of go along for as being as long as they are. It makes them more palatable in some way, and
makes them more interesting too, I think.
Yeah, and I think it just gets to the kind of the musical virtuosity, as John said, of them. I think they are influenced by not just metal, but like all types of music, and are interested in constructing things a certain way. I'm a big fan of this album too. I really liked it. It's very atmospheric. It's I picked up on I read a lot of the lyrics this time around too. There's a lot of dark themes, obviously, thoughts of being controlled and kind of being pawns and things with an example, well, obviously being like Master of Puppets, being front and center, but they have an anti-war song like Disposable Heroes, which is pretty dark, about soldiers just being used for cannon fodder essentially, and the generals not caring about the low people. Leper Messiah, which is one of my favorites, about kind of televangelists and religion. One of the song lyrics is "Send me money, send me green, heaven you will meet, make a contribution and you'll get a better seat." So I think it's just very not sarcastic, but dark humor,
nihilistic.
Yes. And telling it like it is. And they still go to that well of kind of mystical horror that in a song like That Thing That Shall Not Be is an H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu reference. he watches Lurking Beneath the Sea, in Madness You Dwell, and then there's like a crazy guitar solo. So they're still doing that. And then, Welcome Home Sanitarium, about a person in a mental hospital. So, that's as dark as it gets.
And Master of Puppets is like being controlled by drugs, right? Is that?
Yes.
Because I actually looked at the lyrics for that. I was like, because I thought it was like some satanic thing, like the devil's controlled, but no, I was like, it seems like it's drugs.
Yeah, I think it's about cocaine specifically, or heroin.
There's always a
something
personal narrative with it,
Yep.
there may be a universal theme, but it's couched in like an individual's journey, right?
Yes.
Along with the themes Josh mentioned, right? Like the literary, you get the feeling that a lot of the guys are well read too, because they do drop a lot of heavier literary allusions. So
yep. Yeah, and it's not like a kind of cliche lyrics or kind of I don't know. The lyrics, there's content to the lyrics, and I think that the lyrics themselves are well constructed. And ultimately, this album just goes so hard, and I love it listening to it. I listened to it at 9 a.m. yesterday, and it was just such
wakes
a
you
good,
up.
like, wake up, like, way to start your day. But also a great album to work out to. So, yeah, big thumbs up for me. I agree with you guys. I'm not sure if this is like such a big step up from Ride the Lightning that I could tell you which one I like more. I think it's kind of, similar enough that it was hard to differentiate, but I do like this album, and I like that we are continuing the journey with them. So thumbs up for me.
awesome. And we'll be back with them soon enough.
Yep.
I think we're doing Injustice for All, right? Is next.
Yep. Yeah, it's a cold listen, but yeah, definitely in a little bit.